15 Lavender Marriages in old Hollywood's gold age. They were dream couples, it seemed, perfect smiles, crisply pressed tuxedos, sparkling gowns, the epitome of a Hollywood that peddled fantasy as reality. But beneath those shiny surfaces, a lot of these marriages were not founded on love, but on deals, crafted illusions to preserve reputations, studios, and careers. They were referred to as lavender marriages, a subtle euphemism for alliances contracted between gay stars and straight significant others, designed to protect them from scandal in a time when the truth could ruin not only a career, but a life. Hollywood's golden age saw the image-making machinery under its merciless operation. The press was voracious, morality codes were draconian, and the studios had godlike power over their idols. 17 such marriages are documented to have been arranged in those shining decades. Marriages out of fear, not love. Some endured a few days, others a lifetime. Each was its own wobbly performance. Rock Hudson's tale is still the most chilling. He was Universal Studios' golden boy, tall, attractive, with a smile that could melt the screen. America's dream man. But in 1954, the dream seemed to come under threat when Confidential magazine was about to publish the evidence of his personal life, love letters, whispered testimonials, even a fuzzy photo from a Hollywood party. Universal went into a panic. Henry Wilson, Hudson's influential agent, was summoned into the studio boardroom. There would be no denials, no lawsuits. There would be a wedding. Within 48 hours, Hudson was introduced to Phyllis Gates, Wilson's own secretary, young, loyal, and above all, scandal-free. She agreed to the arrangement, reportedly saying, "If a piece of paper can save him, I'll sign it. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it." Let's get started. On November 9th, 1955, they married in a tiny ceremony in Santa Barbara. Only a studio photographer attended. Hudson smiled for 5 quick pictures, the picture of devotion. Behind them, Henry Wilson eyed the clock. The ceremony took 12 minutes. On the following day, Confidential spiked the story. Yet peace was paid for in advance. Months later, Phyllis lived alone. Hudson, permanently on location, posing with actresses to support his straight man image. Their marriage faded away quietly. When Hudson died of AIDS in 1985, the world finally learned the truth that he had been made to conceal. Phyllis later claimed, "I don't regret it, but I feel sorrow for a man who was never allowed to live truthfully." Others staged their weddings under duress, but others were more calculated. Cary Grant and Randolph Scott had one of the longest and most noted roommate relationships in Hollywood. They spent more than a decade living together in a Santa Monica beach house, cooking dinner, tending the garden, even striking a pose for magazines as Hollywood's most charming bachelors. In 1934, Modern Screen ran shots of them sitting side by side in coordinating armchairs reading. The studios cast it as harmless fun. 2 free agents waiting for the perfect girls. But when people started questioning, Grant promptly wed Barbara Hutton, America's wealthiest woman, at the height of his fame. It wasn't an accident. Grant's 5 marriages spanning decades constructed an invulnerable public persona, suave, enigmatic, irresistibly masculine. But his refinement was armor as well as style. His third wife, Betsy Drake, once inscribed in her diary, "I didn't marry a man. I married a shadow, and that shadow belonged to someone else." When, in his last interview, Grant was asked if he'd ever felt he wasn't being himself, Grant simply smiled. The silence testified. Then Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates himself, a man tormented by more than make-believe demons. Hiding behind his nervous intelligence was a secret, frightened heart. Perkins had become part of Rock Hudson's set, meeting at a private Malibu party through director George Cukor, the closeted godfather of Hollywood. They spent furtive weekends together at Big Bear and long, guarded drives up the coast, always holding back, always in fear. When Confidential threatened to expose Hudson again in the early 1970s, Perkins became collateral danger. A solution was arranged, marriage, Enter Barry Berenson, model, photographer, granddaughter of designer Elsa Schiaparelli. She knew his truth, loved him anyway, and offered the safety he needed. They married in 1973 in a quiet Cape Cod ceremony, no reporters, no guests. Their marriage, though born in secrecy, became real in its own terms, soft, compassionate, grounded in mutual shielding. They had 2 sons. When Perkins died of AIDS in 1992, Barry was at his bedside. Years later, she too would die horribly on September 11, 2001, on Flight 11. Before she died, she said of her husband, "He never really belonged to me, but I never regretted it. I was his refuge in a world that wouldn't permit him to be." But No Lavender Marriage was perhaps more legendary than the union of Judy Garland and Vincente Minnelli. MGM's golden duo, she, the child who walked down the yellow brick road. He, the far-sighted director of Meet Me in St. Louis. Their romance was a studio invention. In reality, Minnelli had long been part of New York's underground gay community, known among insiders for his refined taste and his red velvet dress alter ego, Vivian. When Photoplay threatened to expose his past, MGM boss Louis B. Mayer intervened. "If you marry Judy by June," he said, "I'll erase everything." They wed in Mayer's own home in 1945. That night, Garland slept alone. They were Hollywood's happiest couple for 6 years, having daughter Liza while living secretly apart. When Garland finally caught Minnelli sneaking out of a hotel with a French costume designer, she collapsed, referring to herself as a prisoner in a lavender trap. The marriage ended, but its resonance continued, not only in Garland's grief, but in Liza's own tangled adult life, informed by the secrets she inherited. Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor presented another twist, the impeccably ill-matched couple. MGM's magazine darlings, they appeared to be the apotheosis of romantic Hollywood. There was no kiss at their 1939 wedding, however. No wedding cake. No honeymoon suite. A simple room in Taylor's childhood house, beneath a portrait of his mother. Taylor barricaded himself in the bathroom. Stanwyck allegedly read a script in bed. Rumors of her close relationship with women writers and his gay affairs lay hidden beneath the studio's demand for the all-American couple image. They remained married 12 years. No scandal, no child, no romance. When they divorced, the papers read incompatibility. For once, the truth was uncomplicated. Not all lavender marriages ended in tragedy. Some were founded on profound mutual understanding. Composer Cole Porter and socialite Linda Lee Thomas wed in 1919, knowing precisely who they were and precisely what they required of one another. Linda, having just divorced a brutal spouse, found refuge and companionship in Porter's wit and charm. Porter, gay man in a restrictive era, discovered protection and solidity in Linda's respectability. Their union endured for 34 years. She took charge of his house, his image, his health. Even after the accident that left him crippled, he brought music into her life and once wrote her a letter stating, "I love you the way a man loves freedom. You are my freedom." When she passed away in 1954, Porter never penned another song. Theirs was the most untainted lavender marriage, a union without dishonesty, one that emerged from allegiance instead of terror. And Raymond Burr, television's reliable Perry Mason. In the eyes of millions, he was the embodiment of courage and justice. But nearly everything about his private life was a fabrication. His public vita reported 2 deceased wives and a leukemia-killed son. None of them existed. The lies were complicated cover stories to account for why Burr lived alone. The reality? He shared his life with actor Robert Benavides for more than 3 decades. Together, they operated a vineyard, grew orchids, and created a peaceful existence far from Hollywood spotlight. When Burr passed away in 1993, he left it all to Benavides, the only man he ever loved. His family inherited nothing. The world wept for Perry Mason, but the man himself had at last lived, in private, unencumbered as himself. Charles Lawton and Elsa Lanchester, The genius couple responsible for the private life of Henry VIII and witness for the prosecution perhaps had the most creatively successful lavender marriage of them all. Lawton was gay openly to those who knew him, and Lancaster took it in stride long before they wedded in 1929. Their bond was established upon cooperation and love. They cooperated, supported each other, and established successful careers hand in hand for 33 years. Lancaster once stated, "I married him knowing everything. I stayed because love can take many forms." She did not marry again after his passing, opting to be laid to rest next to him. Danny Kaye and Sylvia Fine also merged art and planning. She composed the music, he sang it. Together, they co-authored such classics as The Court Jester and White Christmas. Gossip circulated about Kaye's trysts with men, including rumors of Laurence Olivier, but Fine refused to pay them any mind. Their union was a workshop of art. Despite their separate lives, they were collaborators in art until his passing in 1987. Their daughter Dina went on to say, "It wasn't a normal marriage, but it worked for them. They loved one another in their own way." Then there was Marlene Dietrich, Hollywood's perpetual mystery, and her husband Rudolph Sieber. They wed in 1923 and had a daughter, but promptly led separate lives. He went to live on a farm with his mistress. She lived an international legend, free of gender and convention. Dietrich's affairs with men and women were the stuff of legend, but her marriage was a convenient fiction. It gave her freedom while maintaining the respectability that Hollywood required. When she went to Sieber's farm, she would bring her lovers along with her, a modern family several decades before its time. They remained married until his death in 1976. For all her audacity, Dietrich understood the power of legal illusion. These tales of Rock and Phyllis, Carrie and Randolph, Anthony and Barry, Judy and Vincente, Barbara and Robert, Cole and Linda, Raymond and Robert, Charles and Elsa, Danny and Sylvia, Marlene and Rudolph disclose a whole concealed architecture behind Hollywood's gold glitter. The studio system did not simply make movies. It made people sellable, righteous, marvelous, and